portraits, both alike in dignity, with rival claims whereon we base our tale. Herein contend for authenticity by provenance, by probe, by paper trail. The first, a royal gallery's vaunted prize, 200 years unchallenged, now must face an heirloom piece that in its owner's eyes hath better call to merit pride of place. And none shall shake our quest for truth until but one hath failed to prove, the other will.
It's not Shakespeare. We see thousands upon thousands of would-be portraits of famous figures. And the Sanders is just another one of those that doesn't quite make it. In fact, doesn't even make it at all.
And coming from Canada, oh dear.
The mystery has been, what would this man have looked like? What's the face of genius?
Why would I continue up against a portrait like the Shandow's? My answer to that is, who quits in the middle of success? Would you?
The search for the true face of Shakespeare is a 400-year-old mystery, full of false clues and trails that lead nowhere. He left behind no letters, no diaries, no portraits of himself painted from life. His two official likenesses appeared years after his death and show an expressionless figure, far removed from the vivid world he imagined.
One questions whether this is the face of the plays, so kind of dark and funny and light, and I knew those portraits sort of don't reflect the kind of the DNA of the man that exists within his words.
People have, over the generations, looked for pictures of him, not just the ones that we think are reasonably credible, but ones that are not credible. There are many, many attempts to try and put a face to him. And so if we don't have a face, we make one up.
If a picture of Shakespeare could be proved to have been painted in his lifetime, if it could be documented to express the features of the greatest writer, possibly in the world, I think we'd be talking about something worth perhaps $100 million. Who knows? Quite a lot more. There'd be so many people, so many institutions, so many collectors, so many galleries across the world who I think would give their right arm for an image of Shakespeare done in his lifetime.
Good morning, Roy. Good morning. How are you?
How are you?
Very well. All right.
My great-grandfather, in 1909, said it was his prized possession and he never wanted to sell it. And he fully believed it was the true image of Shakespeare painted by our ancestor 400 years ago.
Very well packed.
He was a friend of Shakespeare and he was a bit actor and traveled with Shakespeare. They were friends. Two of Shakespeare's top actors, Hemmings and Condell, took his plays and published them under what is called the First Folio. If that First Folio hadn't existed, possibly a lot of Shakespeare's plays would have been lost.
We still use today countless words that were invented by Shakespeare, coined by Shakespeare. You know, puke.
Puke.
Zany.
Zany.
Assassinate. Bubble.
Priceless.
Faint-hearted.
Nimble-footed.
Pious. Mad woman.
Jaded. Hunchback.
Honey-tongued.
Schoolboy.
Undress.
Obscene. Swagger.
Arch. Villain.
Moonbeam.
Sanctimonious. Fancy-free.
All of those words emerge from Shakespeare. And thousands more. And we don't know what he looks like.
Misquote. Amazement.
Puppy dog.
Love letter.
If we could prove that this is a true life image of William Shakespeare, then that would complete what Hemming and Cadell had started, in a sense that they immortalized his plays. Now, if we get all the evidence on this painting, we will immortalize his image.
I should wait to put my gloves on.
You know, the painting's been through fire and flood in England, yeah.
See, that painting is now in some kind of a vault.
Yeah.
It was a very intriguing story to start with. The problem was that he was dealing with a painting that he believed was an old painting, a portrait of Shakespeare, but that an art historian early on in the 20th century had declared a forgery, a more modern painting. And he wanted to more or less refute all the allegations made by the author of the article, a man named Spillman. That article, I think, was extremely bad for the portrait because it basically states that it's a copy.
He didn't believe it was Shakespeare. He didn't believe that the date was the true date. He thought it was added many, many, many years later. He thought the bottom half of the painting was painted by someone else. But that was all conjecture because he had no scientific equipment to base his conclusions on. And the plan was to have every scientific test done known to man. Of all the images of Shakespeare, this is the one that's more vibrant and alive.
Got that certain serenity about his eyes and face.
It was painted on oak, which is the best wood you can paint on because it's a straight grain. So that's one of the first tests I had done for the dendrochronology, the age of the wood. If the age of the wood was 400 years old, well, then that puts it back in Shakespeare's time. But if it wasn't, then it can't be Shakespeare.
It's also called tree-ring dating. And by counting the number of rings, you can establish a chronology and know when the tree was cut and the earliest date the painting could have been made. And in this case, the earliest date for the painting was 1597, and a date of 1603 onward was totally plausible. So it was a big and a very important result. We x-rayed the entire painting, and that allows us to go beneath the surface. It could be just little touch-ups if the paint got damaged in these areas. And that would show if there had been like major restoration and overpaint put on what was there previously, and there's no sign at all of that. So, so it's a very clean image. Again, so we took a number of samples in very specific areas, again relating to the allegations of Spillman in his article, the dress of the sitter, and also a sample from the date, because again, Spillman said it was a later addition. And our test showed that there was no evidence of any addition, and it looks as the date is contemporary with the painting. The label on the back of the Sanders portrait was quite damaged and illegible when the painting came to us. Actually, we're lucky we had Spillman's transcription back in 1909 to actually know what it meant. The label read Shakespeare, and then it gives the date when Shakespeare was born, 1564. This likeness taken 1603, confirming the date painted on the panel. Age at that time, 39 years.
London, described at the time as being like a great theatre. I imagine Shakespeare gravitating towards the theatre district of London, which was Shoreditch. It would have been the perfect place to get lost in if you were on the run from something, which Shakespeare may have been, but by the same token, the perfect place to be lonely in because nobody knew you, and you were worth no more, as the saying went, than a piss in the Thames.
To be a creative mind in that world might have been difficult, to be authentic, to be as yourself. And maybe this man is not who he seems.
He's intrigued us by not giving away anything at all except through the plays and the extraordinary imaginative range of them. He produced fair copy straight away. He hardly drafted anything. He obviously thought and dreamt and wrote it out. And many of the plays have a fantastic energy about them, as if they were written almost in a sitting. Shakespeare's career splits pretty neatly into two halves. The first half, obviously, under Queen Elizabeth I, and the second half under King James I. And the turning point, of course, was 1603, when James appointed Shakespeare's company his personal acting troupe and renamed them the King's Men.
Those 9 men suddenly became part of the King's household. That's an extraordinary leap of status. This moment in 1603, that's the kind of moment that people did celebrate with having a portrait painted. It's a great coincidence that in that year, he was given the privilege of wearing metal laces on his clothes. People would read the clothes in the portraits. The dress laws in England started in the 14th century. They were basically to help control the class system. The monarch was giving special privileges of dress to all the different levels of the aristocracy. So for somebody just becoming a gentleman of the Privy Chamber, at the point that they enter that level of status in the King's household, silver and silk lace is what you'd wear. When we made up samples of what we thought this doublet was, there was no doubt that this is covered in parsimane lace of silver and silk. That's what leads me to think there is a possibility that this is Shakespeare. Bareheaded, simple portrait, beautiful quality linen, and the doublet that he's only now allowed to wear, covered in silver and silk lace.
It caused a sensation. Many believe it is a true portrait of William Shakespeare, the only picture of him painted during his lifetime. Others aren't so sure, saying the clues point to a fake and not a find.
This is the only picture of Shakespeare painted during his lifetime.
When we went public in 2001, we became the 451st painting of William Shakespeare, or claiming to be William Shakespeare. With a portrait of this stature, we had to promote it because for 400 years, nobody knew anything about this.
It is a true life image of William Shakespeare. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Have I ever lied to you before?
My view is that it's not Shakespeare. It has to be said, I do see would-be portraits of Shakespeare, which aren't, probably twice a year. So the emergence of another wasn't, at the time, that significant.
The reaction to this story was greater than to anything I've ever written, and I didn't expect it at all. I set off thinking I was writing a cute little feature story about a portrait, and the next thing you know, CNN's on line 1, and the Hanoi Daily Herald is on line 2, and the whole world wants to know about this portrait. The response was astonishing.
I shall never forget the moment, flicking through Vanity Fair, seeing it. It was intensely moving. It has fantastic abstract quality, a very powerful modern appeal. It was the sheer beauty and power of the portrait that took my breath away. The next encounter, The Guardian, previewing the Searching for Shakespeare exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery.
The Saunders portrait is back in the news because it's coming to London. It'll be part of a special exhibition at the National Portrait Gallery. The show features 6 portraits, all very different, and all supposed at various times to be of Shakespeare. This has rekindled debate about which, if any, is the real likeness.
Of course, it is in the owner's interest to establish the Saunders as a true, authentic likeness of Shakespeare. But there is also an institutional interest on behalf of the National Portrait Gallery to maintain the notion that the Chandos is indeed the only true likeness.
The amazing story of the portrait galleries in Washington and London is that each was founded on the basis of a single, very important, iconic portrait for that particular nation. For the Americans, it was, in fact, Washington. And for the British, it was Shakespeare. It's interesting that that one first iconic portrait wasn't a king or a queen. It was one of the people that embodies the sense of the greatness of Englishness, the English language, the English poetry, English culture, English self-expression. Having that first portrait was a wonderful birth. It justified everything else. It justified an entire institution around itself.
Well, I think the strategy clearly was to promote the Chandos, NPG #1, to bolster its claim to be the only true, authentic likeness of our great poet and playwright, Shakespeare. It's a much published, much loved image, and that being challenged is a problem. The strategy didn't work. The Saunders still knocked everything around it off the wall.
I suppose I'm very doubtful that this is a portrait of William Shakespeare, and my key reason for that is because Shakespeare was 39 in 1603, and what I think we're looking at is a much younger man, so there's quite a big problem there.
That does not mean to me that it's not Will Shakespeare at 39, because historians of portraiture know well that it's almost second nature to a portrait artist to be generous to his subject and to give it a certain youthfulness, a certain life, because that's part of what allowed them to make their living. You get the sense that there was indeed a person sitting for it, that there was a character that the artist was capturing.
The mischievous sort of smile that this portrait has, I mean, you can almost feel the intelligence. And this is how you'd want Shakespeare to look. I mean, I've stood in front of the Chandos portrait in the Portrait Gallery in London. It leaves me stone cold. I held this painting in my arms and I got feelings coming out of everywhere. And so, what is that? I mean, there's something there.
But they are so different, these two paintings, stylistically so different. And the Saunders is clearly dated to the first decade of the 17th century. Elizabethan portraiture is all about a two-dimensional, almost graphic approach. The third dimension doesn't exist. In the Chandos, it does. The Chandos is not an Elizabethan painting. I mean, it just simply doesn't fit.
It's not dated, it's not signed. It came up from a very dubious rogue of a person called William Davenant, and we're studying his life now. But what's coming into focus is that this is the greatest fraud in the world of art ever, I think, to perpetuate the lie that the sitter in the Chandos portrait is William Shakespeare. I discovered there's hair was added to the Chandos, about 1 inch on both sides and 1/2 inch to his beard. Now, who in heaven's name would do that to a true life image of William Shakespeare.
This man, Lloyd Sullivan, has basically spent his life savings trying to prove the other. And so he's been willing, which very few people would ever have been willing to do, I can tell you that. So the passion and the work that this Lloyd Sullivan has put into it is unbelievable.
The Chandos portrait has an extremely strong claim. And if I was to give it the benefit of the doubt, if I was to give the Roman sponsor of the games the thumb sign, it would be about there.
And the Sanders, where would your thumb be?
As much as I'd like the Sanders to be right, not least because it's actually a rather romantic image, what this picture lacks is any form of documented proof. Admittedly, it has an old label on the back, but the writing is almost certainly later. I fear, in the case of the Sanders portrait, the thumb is pretty well done.
Lord, what fools these mortals be.
We had 12 scientific tests done by the Canadian Conservation Institute, and those tests all proved positive. And there was one more left to be done. And this weekend, that last forensic ink test will be done on the ink, on the paper label of the Sanders portrait, which I believe will prove that the ink is 400 years old, which will be consistent with all the other materials used in the portrait. And it will also substantiate the integrity of the originator of the portrait, my grandfather, 14 generations ago. The paper label has been dated 400 years old. The glue is 400 years old. How could the ink not be?
Dr. Barabee can sample the ink and the paper fibers from the label on the back of this painting.
I've never even contemplated for 1 second that that ink would be 18th or 19th century. It doesn't make any sense to me. It gives the exact date of his birth. It has the original way Shakespeare spelled his name, which is Shakspere. Those details, intimate details of Shakespeare's life, were only became public 170 years later in 1773. So it's further proof that my ancestor would have to know Shakespeare intimately to know all and get all those details correct 170 years before anybody knew about it.
There's definitely ink there, but it's very thin. You can see areas where the ink was, but they're somewhat blurred, and it's clear that quite a bit is worn away. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit more from this spot.
Lloyd Sullivan really has examined his painting rigorously. It passed all tests with flying colors. However, we mustn't forget, science never makes, it can only break authenticity.
It's not very sharp, but you can see lettering in there.
So it doesn't date it. It's just an ink that has been used for hundreds of years.
Now, iron gall ink was used over several centuries, so it's not, again, a precise dating, but at least it's consistent, so everything comes together nicely.
I don't think any of these portraits will be in the same room ever again, especially since the NPG have now eliminated 4 of the top 6 paintings. And the Sanders is still in the running. I'm sorry, I get emotional about this.
This has been it's been an incredible, long process for you.
Well, I was brought up with it. My grandmother had that painting in Montreal, and she lived with us 5 years before she died. And the painting was under the bed. And I used to bring her tea, and she'd pull out the painting so I could have a little look at it. I was really fascinated, absolutely fascinated by it. William Shakespeare, she told me. And I used to stare at it. It was very mysterious. And when I looked at it, it seemed like the eyes were moving. My parents, they discussed this endlessly. You know, their voices, I could still hear them. They get emotional over it, and so do I. I think it's a marvelous thing for our family to be associated with someone that was a close friend of Shakespeare. Well, Thomas Hale Sanders is my great-grandfather, who lived in England and had the portrait. Thomas was a painter himself, and there's other examples of earlier members of the Sanders family that painted. He died in 1915 and willed the painting to his son, Aloysius, my grandfather. He came with his young family to Canada in 1894, but then Aloysius died in 1919, so he never acquired the painting. It was held up all those years. Finally, my grandmother went over to England and brought the painting back.
Some of the pictures you probably know of them, but they're quite nice. This one here, of course, of all of them.
Yes, yes.
And
there's your mother.
Yes, and there's your mom and Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah. Well, there's the...
That's on their way back from England in 1919.
That's a wonderful story of your mother going over and getting the portrait from the British courts, who were so reluctant to let it go.
Because they thought it might be a famous masterpiece by one of their native sons. So finally, my grandmother, though, said no, she wanted it. She's a stubborn woman. Stubborn woman.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yes. And so she got it, and they came home with the painting. And then as the family grew up, they passed the painting around. And that's how I remember it as a little girl on my dining room wall. And I'd say to my mother, who is that old man up there on the wall? First of all, she'd tell me about Shakespeare, because for her, that was much more important than who painted it. And then I'd go and see my grandmother, and her approach was quite different. It was always who painted the picture. And it was painted, she always told the same story. It was painted by somebody in our family. And she also said that it was by somebody in our family who was also a member of the troupe, Shakespeare's troupe.
The King's Men.
The King's Men, indeed.
Yeah.
That's what she used to tell me.
Oh, brave new world that has such people in it.
So you have this discrete family object that emerges from a closet in Montreal, and suddenly all the institutional investment in these other images related to Shakespeare suddenly is at risk. You've got a huge business around licensing for all those hundreds of thousands of texts that circulate with so-called images of Shakespeare. The coffee mugs and the T-shirts and the various Stratfords all over the world. What's happening here is powerful British colonial institutions like the National Portrait Gallery, like various British universities, Oxford and Cambridge, and the scholars associated with them, deciding what is authentic and deciding who has the power to make interpretations stick, because they're associated with larger economic entities than a retired engineer from Bell.
We know roughly what Shakespeare looks like. There are 3 portraits, one almost certainly done during his lifetime, 2 just after. And they all conform, admittedly, to a rather unromantic-looking figure, a slightly sly-looking civil servant, rather than an Adonis that we would like the author of the sonnets to be. They all have similar features in the form of the brow, the raised high brow, the balding hair, the facial hair, and a sort of general almond-shaped face as well.
The task was to age the original portrait from age 39 to age 52. I compared against the 2 other portraits. The Chandos portrait and the engraving, I don't believe that they're from the same person. There are some resemblance, but again, if I go back to the bone structure, I will have to say no. The Saunders and the engraving are a little bit closer. From the Saunders, I can establish that there is an attached lobe, which is a very strong, unique characteristic of one individual. The earlobe helps to determine if we're dealing with the same person. And we can see the same attached lobe on the engraving and on Saunders' portrait. On the Chandos, you can actually see a nice, round, detached earlobe. Very different from the engraving.
The game is up.
It does have a critical flaw. It has a broken provenance. The history of its existence and its ownership from the time when it was supposed to have been created to today is not continuous. We can only trace it back for effectively a few generations. He has to find that reference somewhere between 1603 and about the middle of the 19th century, where somebody says in a letter, oh, I saw the Saunders Shakespeare portrait, and here's what we think of it. He has to document the provenance.
Where are the documents? Nobody will accept a painting of William Shakespeare unless you have some documents to show the association between the Saunders family and the Shakespeare family. We're slowly retrieving some of them. We have a genealogist that's working almost night and day in Worcester, where our family's from in England.
It's been quite a journey, quite a journey. I've been working on this now for 5 years, since day one. I should imagine we've done about 12,000 hours. Since then, it's been an absolute obsession. That character up there is the problem. Look at the shape of that tree.
Imagine the age of it, can't you, Pam?
Oh, unbelievable. Elizabeth Hales of Harvington Hall, October 1881. This is where the Hales came into the Saunders. Thomas Hales Saunders was born 1830.
Oh, got you. Pam knows more about Lloyd's family than he knows about it.
You know, you can get confused. You know, you're looking at over 500 years, and it's nothing for me to wake him up at 12 o'clock and say, well, what do you reckon to this here? You know, and I say, would you think that that is viable to that. And then we have a discussion, don't we?
Yep.
Old Smiler. The grin said it all. He looks at me, his eyes follow me around the room. He always watching me as much as say, you're not going to find me. I'm still hidden well. And I used to say, we will find him. Old Smiler will be found.
That's a nice one.
I should imagine we've done every parish in Worcestershire.
1787 there.
Part of Warwickshire, part of London.
There's another one here.
There's old Benjamin, 12th of Feb, 1852, aged 89. After a lot of research, we managed to find a John Sanders born in 1637 in Alcester, which is quite near to Stratford. Matthew was the eldest son of John.
So this is the missing link what you've been looking for then?
This is the London link. A true and perfect inventory of the goods and chattels of Matthew Sanders, late of the parish of Bromsgrove. When he died in 1745, in his will, he had 8 pictures, which was very unusual. And a corner cupboard and 8 pictures. That's interesting. £1, 9p.
It'd be wonderful if you could get some idea of what those pictures were about.
I know,
That maybe one of them is the Sanders portrait.
could well be.
Yeah.
Out of all the wills we looked at, that was the only one with the pictures in, which...
It wasn't customary back in those days, for people to have portraits on the wall
No.
of their homes?
No, not at all.
Well, okay, I'll wait for your email and go through it.
Well, this is the church where John Emmons, one of the King's men, was baptised. Remember I showed you an article where there was John Emmons, Condell, and also this William Sanders, all connected to Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this would all fit in.
Sorry?
Alan.
Hemmings and Condell, they were both top actors in Shakespeare's company of actors called the King's Men. And I'm just wondering if we are related in some way, the Sanders.
It's almost certain one of the Hemmings married Sanders. You'll see on your map Philippa Sanders.
Oh, so there is a connection then between Sanders and Hemmings. That's very interesting.
Now, that's one thing we've got to look at very seriously, because there seems to be a pattern coming along.
And if that can be proven, that puts Sanders right next to Shakespeare.
There's nothing known about the man. We are all sort of microcosms, and we are all such stuff as dreams are made of, and we are all molecules. There's a whole sort of quantum side, I think, to Shakespeare, and that's how he's remained to live beyond his years. I think about time that Shakespeare was dusted off and handed to the everyman as an everyman. And I think that's what's been lacking, that notion of him being accessible. It's a beautiful portrait. There's a real life behind this face, isn't there? There's a sort of mystery. It could be a secret, but there's a great deal of pathos in this. It's wonderful.
There's something, and I think this is present in the Sanders portrait, of the way he's slightly tilting his head, the way he's slightly leaning out of frame. There's a look in that portrait of a man watching from the sidelines, if you like, looking from the wings. And I feel, in some ways, that that's part of Shakespeare's greatness, is it's his ability to look at things not from the center, not from the mainstream. I happen to believe that his Catholicism was quite deeply rooted in him. And of course, being a Catholic was a very dangerous thing to be in the police state of Elizabeth's England.
To live back in those days was to live in fear, especially if you were a Catholic. And I believe that that's how my great-great-grandfather, 14 generations ago, met up with Shakespeare. They were all churchgoers, very strong Catholics, and there was a common bond. And I think that's how my great-grandfather got permission from Shakespeare to paint his painting.
It is precisely because of his Catholicism that we know so little about Shakespeare, that he kept in the shadows as much as he could, because the danger of being exposed was very great. You have the impression of somebody who was just eyes and ears, someone who watched everything, who experienced everything and allowed everything to pass through him.
I always believed that Shakespeare's Catholicity had a great effect on who his friends were and what he did and what his associations were, because I read where Shakespeare moved 8 times in London, England, over a 23-year period, and that tells you a lot. Why would somebody in his position be moving every few years? He wanted to live a private life. He didn't want people to know what he was doing, who he was associating with, and where he was going. Tell me, I'm very interested in Coton and the connection there with the families and the Throgmortons.
The Throgmortons were the most powerful Catholic families of the day in the Midlands. This was a well-known Catholic community, was Coton. Yes. I'm trying to find the distance. If we can go from Coton to Tardybeg, into Bromsgrove, and then hopefully, if we can try and get to Alvington. Well, Matthew had these pictures, but the interesting thing is he was born in Coton in the 1600s. So it's quite possible that Shakespeare knew the Sanders from Coton.
That's it right there, December 28th, 16, there it is. Wrong spelling though. I never heard of this fella.
This is the
Stephen
Sanders, yeah.
Sanders. Well, it's a brand new branch of the family that I wasn't aware of even.
Yeah. So in the book, one of the things we need to think about is how to present this sort of information, because this is a whole. I mean,
it's a new key to the family tree that we didn't know about before.
Yeah.
It's a giant jigsaw puzzle, and you got to put one piece in at a time.
Yeah.
And you can easily fall down a crack or fall into a ravine and go off on a tangent. But she's now honed in on Stephen Sanders of Coton, born about 1600. If you can just follow this down over here to Matthew, when he died, he had 8 paintings or 8 pictures. They called them pictures in those days in his inventory. And then from then on,
they had
it
1,
passes.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Then it passes down to Uncle John.
So in fact, we're really one link,
Step away,
one link away from Stephen Sanders, who carried the portrait through all those generations and down to you. That's astonishing.
This must be the Uncle John, 1746. That confirms that with that. John Hawkes, Sanders, Coal Hill, which was Wilds Lane.
Coton's the home of the Throgmortons, related by marriage to the Ardens, and Shakespeare's mother was an Arden.
Well, the Throckmorton family is, you know, very well known as sort of a key family associated with the Catholic underground in England.
The Sanders were living at Coton. There was a network of Catholic families. All these people knew each other or were related to each other or had married each other's sisters or cousins. We know that there were masses being said in secret in houses in Warwickshire and Worcestershire. And it is entirely possible that Shakespeare would have attended one. It was high treason for a Catholic priest to be in the country, punishable by hanging, drawing, and quartering. Secret hiding places were built so that the priests could disappear if the house was searched. There were spies and informers everywhere.
The Reformation had just gone through churches and removed images and cleaned out these false idols. So you did not display your portraits. The Sanders family would have been discreet about this image. It explains some of the, you know, the covert activities, the carefulness that we're reading into the story, I think, around the Sanders portrait, because it was a physical representation of Shakespeare.
I believe that the family didn't want it to be known that they had this treasure because of fear of losing the painting.
So the name of the painter, do we have the actual name? Do we know?
Not yet, really.
Not yet, okay.
At this point, we're not certain. We know it's a Sanders.
This is what this genealogical work, what's so fascinating about is it's opening up the history that will not speak its name around Shakespeare, which is precisely the degree to which the religious controversies really do play a crucial role.
So all that leads you to a man like Shakespeare leading a secret life.
You're dealing with a level of circumstantial evidence where the amount of it is, you know, is just going to outweigh any exceptionalist argument where you say, well, you know, we don't have actual physical proof that John Sanders was, you know, absolutely a Catholic. We don't have video of him, you know, taking a Holy Communion. But it's a place on the map. It's had real people who had real affiliations with each other.
And short hops to other little villages.
Exactly.
That were,
and who produced actual objects like the Sanders portrait, and who out of the persecution are creating art, they're creating paintings, they're creating theater. The substrate of all of that is revolt and resistance and you know, persecution and state terrorism and all these fascinating things.
Well, you got me all fired up. When do we start?
Right now. Get out the pen.
It's a huge challenge. But I am a great believer the cream always rises to the top. It will come through, because it cannot be ignored.
The very fact that this portrait has managed to shake what would have been general consensus that it couldn't be Shakespeare is a sign of the strength of the argument in its favor.
I'm writing a book right now, and that takes a lot more research. So I don't think it'll ever end until I die.
To thine own self be true.
He survives not through an image, but through the word. And once you invoke his language, it is language to be spoken, and language to be heard. And I think he kind of appears in those moments.
Our revels now are ended. These are actors. As I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep.